Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listen Beyond the Soundbites. Guy Page is joining us today as a guest co-host. Guy, thank you for coming.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're here too. Our guest today is a very interesting candidate. Is Wayne Billado, is a Democrat. He is running for governor, lieutenant governor, state senate for Franklin County, House of Representatives for St. Albans 3-1, and Justice of the Peace. Goodness, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What is 3-1? Not how many towns are in that little group?
I believe it's only 2 districts because I believe St. Albans town and the city get lumped together.
Oh, okay. So you're right in the one area. Cool.
Right.
Well, we obviously have a lot of questions to ask Wayne, but first let's start off with a little brief look at your background and your past.
For sure. So I'm fairly young to be running for top executive in the state. Only 23 years old. Was born and raised in Vermont. I was one of the young people that never moved away. I grew up in Georgia, Vermont. I went to school at Essex High School. I have family all across the state. My great-grandparents came over from Ireland and lived in Connecticut, and then eventually moved up to Vermont. I have family everywhere in the state. But really, this is my first political endeavor.
Right.
I've never held a office before. I have 2 children, 2 daughters, one 5 years old, one 11 months old. Her birthday is next month.
Cool.
She'll be 1. I have a fiance, and we both live in the house I own in St. Albans.
Great, excellent. Well, welcome. I know Guy wants to ask you a very important question. Why?
Sure.
Yeah.
So why are you here? I mean, you're 23, you're running for 5 offices or whatever. You've obviously got a reason for why you're doing this, and I think people want to know.
Right, yeah. There's been too many people in this country, in this state, that have struggled economically for not this year, not just last year, but for decades and even generations.
Yes.
People of color, people who are minorities in all senses. And my campaign really wants to start the war on poverty and try and bring quality food, clean water, and a decent education to as many people as possible.
How are you going to do that?
That's definitely a tough question.
Yeah.
I think the main thing that sets my campaign apart from a lot of other politicians would definitely be my focus on permaculture. And my initiatives to try and get a food forest at least in the works with my administrations.
Okay.
And for those of us who are a little dense, what is permaculture?
Permaculture is seeking balance between nature and man. So really it is working with perennial fruit trees, nut trees, fruit bushes and stuff like that, as well as annual gardens, and then promoting, putting the water into the earth instead of, letting it run off into a ditch.
Right.
So water collection, and then using animals to also help, build compost, as well as, clean up food scraps and kitchen scraps and such like that instead of sending stuff to a landfill. So yeah, it's really trying to find balance with nature, but we have to do so by working with nature and not against it.
Because I must say, when I heard the word permafrost came to mind, and I was thinking that most of it is the focus on the earth and because you were talking about composting, which brings it back to the earth and kind of creates a circle.
Right,
so that makes sense.
There's certain cycles and systems that we can utilize to provide an abundance of food.
Right.
Wayne, 100 years ago, there was a young man from Putney, Vermont, who was a gardener and an agricultural expert who later became known as the boy governor. His name was George Aiken.
Yes, that's right.
And so maybe it's not such a stretch.
Yeah.
Right.
Work for George Aiken, it could work for you, who knows?
I wouldn't be the youngest governor in history. The youngest was the first governor of Michigan. He was 23 when he was
There you go.
inaugurated.
Really?
Didn't we have somebody running, what, 14 years old? Or
Right.
something? A couple of years
Yeah,
ago,
there,
that young
there
man?
is no age
No,
restriction.
Right.
yeah, that's
Right.
really cool, because he was pretty articulate. I'd heard him being interviewed. He wasn't, 14 years old. He was pretty self-assured.
Sure.
Yeah, you
So,
got all the signatures.
I was
that
going to
you need.
ask you a question about what kind of position did you have for each of the positions? What kind of priorities did you have? But in fact, after hearing your talk about why, it would fit
Would fit
because-
everywhere, even
Right.
with Justice of the Peace, because
Right.
I'd still be helping with elections, and there'd be a lot of
Yeah.
people that I would rub shoulders with that I could,
Yeah, exactly.
at least try and spread the message, and while trying to start up this entire thing in my own backyard.
That's great.
So tell us more about permaculture and why it would be good for Vermont, why this would help.
So not only would it help us increase our water quality, it's also going to provide us with an abundance of food. It increases the quality of our soil, meaning healthier, richer foods as we go. It helps us reduce, reuse, and recycle, because a lot of people that use permaculture, use things from the junkyard. They reuse things that are left on the side of the road to,
Sure.
Make planters and things like this. And not only that, it would help us battle climate change. Having a huge amount of weather-resistant perennial trees that will
right.
produce food in the summer would
Right.
make it a lot easier
Right.
should we be affected by, harsher winters or longer winters or even hotter, drier summers. So really it's an investment for right now, and it's an investment for the future.
The governor has talked about the economy. What do you see this approach impacting our economy for the better, I would hope? And,
Right, yeah,
and
so
where does it fit in?
as we were talking about earlier, food is a huge portion of monthly bills.
Right.
And, if we have hundreds of thousands of trees that produce fruit in the state, or nuts, or just all kinds of other bushes that provide, on the streets or in small neighborhoods or at schools, homeless shelters, so many more people would be able to eat well and not have to spend money on it. I'm not trying to say that I'm going to have the state start their own farm and make money off of it using taxpayer dollars. It's an investment for the future, so any fruit tree or plant that we plant most likely won't be sold. Really, I just want to bring back the virtual food forest that the Native American peoples once had cultivated in the New England area.
Right.
I'm thinking that with more Vermonters working at home, that maybe that might be an advantage, because I don't know about you, but I get to work at my computer in my home office at 7:45 in the morning. By 11 o'clock, I'm really ready to go do something else. And maybe if I had a few fruit trees or
Right.
something, I
Right.
could go out and do that, and then come back and do some
Right.
more work.
Yeah, I've been working from home myself, and it is wicked tough, especially with schools had been closed for so long, and then it was summer anyways, and daycares had been closed for a while.
Right.
So, it's really hard to try and get something done in an 8-hour period when you have an 11-month-old and a 5-year-old running around, always asking for snacks, and
Do you?
do
Do you have a couple of little kids
He's got
running around?
one- yeah, 5 and
Yep,
a
I have a
little,
5-year-old
brand
and
new
an 11-month-old.
Wow.
She's going to be 1 year next month.
Okay.
And my cousins, they work 2 hours at a time, while the other spouse is dealing with the 2 kids. So all day long, they're 2 and 2, and which is a pretty good system, I think.
So the real question, Wayne, is what does your significant other think of you running for office?
Well, that's she thinks I should be focusing more on work, which is definitely true. But she can see the merit in what I'm trying to do, and she supports me.
Good.
I think if you get the word out, what kind of a financial investment would it take to really get into this type of lifestyle? I would call it a lifestyle because,
Yes.
and it needs education and financial help. And
Right.
would you be looking
Right.
to help people who want to get into this?
For sure, for sure. So it would have to be some kind of incentive,
Yeah.
possibly some kind of tax incentive, tax break, specifically targeted at trying to get people to grow food at home,
Right.
more so than they are, because there are quite a few people that already are growing their own food, they have gardens and stuff like that, but it's not their main supply of food.
I think most of us love, I do, I love farmers markets. I go hit them up
Exactly.
more than one on Saturdays.
Exactly, and that's another thing too. Any overproduction that somebody has in their own backyard,
Right.
you bring it right to the farmer's
Yeah.
market. You can make a little bit of side cash. So there would be tax incentives, stuff like that. We would also push grants, but where the main focus for this would be is at schools and
Right.
homeless shelters.
Okay.
To try and get our most vulnerable people fed first. And then at the same time, we'd have state officials or other people that already are affiliated with those places, and they'd be working to teach these people, and teach the kids, teach people that may not have a home where they can grow their own food. But if we can teach from a very young age how to rely on the land for food and water production and fuel, medicine, that would give all the children in Vermont a very solid foundation for their learning.
Wayne, do you think there would need to be any changes in Vermont land use laws, like Act 250 or whatever, to enable this?
It's definitely possible. I don't know the specifics of Act 250, but I know there's a lot of struggles when it comes to trying to get stuff built or changed in the state. Look no further than the Cirque Highway in Essex.
Right.
They started work on that when I was born,
Right.
and it still isn't done, and it wasn't completed to what they had voted on originally.
Yep. And that helped IBM to make its decision to leave here because
Right.
they wanted good transportation to the major highways, and cutting through Essex and everything just was a time waster for them.
Right, right.
I had this idea for a political cartoon that the year is 2060, and the sign is Cirque Highway finally completed. And they're there at a ribbon cutting.
Right, right.
And so they cut the ribbon, it's all done, and the guys take out the communicators and say, okay, beam me home now.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So, because who knows by then in fact, our transportation needs have already changed with the pandemic and with people staying more at home, that there will be fewer people on the roads.
Right, which is good for the environment as well, and good for people's wallets. Getting around in Vermont is so expensive. We don't live in a state like New York or California where, there's all these big cities where you could really walk to anything you needed. But I got to go to my work, I have to drive at least 45 minutes.
Where do you
and
work,
that's I live in St. Albans. I work in Williston.
Oh, there's no easy way to get there.
No easy way to get there, and that's a short drive really compared to some of the places that people need to get to.
Right.
Getting around from rural Vermont is one of the most difficult challenges we'll have to face. Even with so many people staying home, and then the state trying to become the remote work capital of the country, there's still going to be a lot of driving people are going to need to do
Well,
to
we'll
get
see
what
after
they need to
COVID
get.
what stays and
Right.
what goes, whether the kids are still going to be doing at-home learning. Because in the state government, you don't know how many people travel from upstate, the Northeast Kingdom. They spend a lot of time traveling to work. I was very surprised when I found out how much of my staff did that every day.
My fiance actually, of course we live in St. Albans. She drives to Newport to work at the hospital.
Wow.
So that's a long drive. That's about an hour and a half. So it's actually like the same mileage from St. Albans to Williston, but of course there's even less of a good way to get there.
Right.
Yes, that's a
All
much
the way
longer
over
drive.
the mountain. Yeah, it's a drive.
Yeah, so we've all been paying attention to the governor and to the legislature about the Global Warming Solutions Act. Have you been following that, given your interest in
Yes.
the environment?
So I was glad to see that it went through.
Right.
Sad to see that it had to be his veto had to be overridden. I don't see that the bill really does much, but it does set some pretty clear goals for the state,
Right.
which is important. We need to know what we're trying to achieve before we write up a plan of how to achieve it. So I think it's good that it passed, because that gives us a good starting point.
I think most people were mad about the 24-person unelected committee that has the authority over the legislature. I mean, what they say goes, and the legislature has no input, and that's what's upsetting most of us, myself included. If they made it a lot more, have some criteria for the 24 people. First of all, 24 people around the table. I'd like to see how they're going to come to some solutions, because sometimes they don't do much when it's that large. But I think that's what most people are worried about. These are unelected. Who are they? And if it's the same old names that we all know over the years, it's not going to go anywhere. So I think I just find it offensive to encourage people to sue, just because they can sue anyway.
Right.
But it's like opening the door.
Yeah,
And you'll see that in other bills.
Oh, sure.
It's not. I don't think it's good to perpetuate the sue crazy culture that we're already in.
Well, there's no money in this other than the winner or loser pays for the other's attorney fees and stuff.
It just opens the door to waste some money.
Right.
So do you do permaculture yourself now?
Currently working on it. We have a garden going. Didn't really do well. It's our first year, and this summer was actually very dry.
Right.
So it was hard to really keep everything watered and going. But I do have some perennials growing in my backyard that have begun to start pruning and getting ready to produce more. Some wild grapes, blackberries, currant. So yeah, definitely working on that. And I've also already spoke with the town clerk's office about getting permits for greenhouse, getting a permit to build a duck pond. Actually,
Oh.
I'd like
how
to try
cool
and
is
get some
that?
ducks.
They'll come. I have one next to my house and the neighbor next to me, and we get the blue heron when he's on his way down south, and back north he stays with us for a week or two.
Right.
That's sort of cool.
Yeah.
So
Would
what?
you be thinking eggs and meat?
Eggs and meat, but at the same time, ducks eat ticks.
Oh.
And they eat a lot of other bugs, slugs, and stuff like
Okay.
that. So, and then at the same time, they poop everywhere, and that helps the
Makes
compost.
it grow.
Right.
Right. So
Okay.
I'm stretching out in my mind to what else could be included in this, and there's a very contentious discussion about trapping. Would trapping be part of this this lifestyle?
Not really.
No.
Most definitely not for like sport or
Right.
really for
For eating.
clothing or eating.
That's
eating,
what I
would
was
say
thinking
eating,
about.
eating, hunting, stuff like that.
Right.
I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah.
As long as nothing's wasted.
Right. I agree with
The
you on
the
that.
waste is.
Yeah.
We need to cut back on the waste. But no, really, it's mostly raising your own animals.
Mm-hmm.
And then, trying to feed those animals from what's already growing. Trying to not rely on buying grain or buying anything. Trying
Oh,
to
cool.
get the system.
Really self-sufficient.
Get the system to be sufficient in itself and resilient.
So that wouldn't happen overnight. So you'd be committed to doing this for a couple of years before, because you just mentioned you weren't successful with growing. So that's sort of
Right.
the soil. And
Right.
I know in organic farming, it takes years to actually be an organic farm, because of the soil has to be used I absolutely don't know what I'm talking about, seriously. But I know that it takes 4 or 5 years for the soil to be claimed organic.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
There's a lot, and it's not going to be an easy road. It's not
Right.
going to be quick. There are some nut trees that don't start producing a crop for 30 years.
Right.
So, and they're even the fastest growing apple trees are something like 6 to 7 years before they produce. And obviously, our focus on fruit trees, nut trees, stuff like that
Right.
is going to be, I wouldn't say limited, but it's going to be a lot of work with little payout for a long time.
Right. So they have to continue working, continue
Right.
driving, continue
keep growing,
living,
raising animals,
Right.
keep planting in the garden, and then using the perennials that we already
Right.
have, or the trees that are already here, in a more efficient manner, and then planting as many as we can everywhere we can.
When I was in high school, one thing they didn't teach us, or college, was how to use a checkbook, a basic life skill.
Exactly.
So it occurs to me that one of the things you're saying is let's teach kids young how to grow blueberries,
Right.
how
Grow
to do
blueberries.
permaculture,
Well,
so
then-
that when they're out.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt you. Go
no,
ahead.
go ahead.
But then not only that, but teach them how to go out in nature and find things that are already available to eat.
Foraging. Good.
I wouldn't be able to walk out in the woods right now and pick a mushroom that wouldn't kill me.
Right.
There's all kinds of things that just grow wherever they may grow that you can eat. So that would also make it a lot easier for children that get out of high school and don't have a place to stay. There's a lot of kids that become homeless. It's hard to break the cycle of poverty in adulthood.
Right.
And that would really give the tools to these kids to where if they did find themselves homeless, they could find something
Well,
to
that
eat.
happens when the cliff, they call it, when kids are in social services till they're 18 and in some kind of home or something, or
Right.
foster home, and bam,
And then they're out.
they're
and
out,
what are
no
they going to
nothing.
do?
Sure.
And that takes a lot of training for them to make it on their own.
Right.
One of the toughest problems legislature and the governor will be facing in the next few years, or not facing if they don't, is housing.
Right.
Vermont has as our population grows, our housing doesn't. We have one of the lowest vacancy rates in the nation. 19,000 abandoned substandard homes.
Huh.
Going to be doing a story in this soon.
Really? Wow.
We have a serious problem, and it's not getting any better. Even though they're spending $80 million a year on low-income housing.
Yeah.
So,
What do we do
my
about that?
23-year-old candidate, what you mentioned homeless youth people, real problem. I have a family member who's virtually homeless because there's no housing in the town where she lives,
Yeah.
even though she has a full-time job.
Right.
What can be done?
Not to mention how expensive it is.
Right.
Exactly.
Especially
if
in
you-
Burlington, forget
They
that.
go together.
Yeah.
Availability and
Right.
expense. of course.
Right. So what is available is only available to people that are wealthy.
Right.
So what I would do, there's a lot of different approaches that we can take. The first thing that I would want to do is, well, I'll speak as governor because I'll have more say agency-wise in setting up something like that to actually go out and handle these types of things.
Okay.
I would create a task force that is dedicated to working towards affordable housing.
Okay.
And this task force would go out and find these abandoned properties and try to acquire them either by eminent domain or purchasing it from
Sure.
whoever's holding on to it.
Sure.
And then to either renovate those or tear them down and make way for something else.
Okay. The state sort of has a plan to do this right now.
Right.
What they're running into, people buy a nice big old Victorian home in the middle of Rutland. This could house 30 people. They buy it for nothing, for 50 grand.
Right.
And then they learn it costs 150 grand to bring it up to code. And our energy codes, et cetera,
Right.
they're not getting easier, they're getting harder. So the nut that the housing commissioner told me last week, he just can't crack yet, is that the state's housing codes, among other reasons, are making it so that financially it can't be done.
Would they be, the people that are buying these Victorians, was their plan to do apartments and have these 30 people in the house, or to make it for them?
Right, because
Apartments.
Because if
yeah.
they were making it for apartments, I would think they could take it easy on the
See,
cost of things. And
my thought
You would
on
think,
it was, if you were only purchasing it for yourself, then
Yeah.
there's not much in the way of what has to be done code-wise. It's definitely, there's a lot that needs to be done if you're renting it out, because I looked at that when I had purchased my house, and there's quite a bit of things. You know, you need to have all the smoke alarms
Right.
wired in,
bathrooms.
asbestos and lead paint and all that stuff,
Lead
and
paint.
railings and on the stairs and everything like that. There's a lot, of course.
So you're a
And then-
homeowner.
right, yes.
Oh, cool.
So I didn't have to do any of that because my house, I guess, met at least enough of the baseline codes so that I could just move right in.
Yeah.
There was nothing that I had to specifically do for the state to be able to move in. And my house was built in 1900, so it's not like
nice.
it's a new house or anything like
High
that.
ceilings.
Yeah,
Yeah, I bet.
in the living room at least. But yeah, so we would definitely have to work with the legislature to try and ease some of the codes, or at least make it so that we're proactive about them.
Okay.
So before people buy these places, you know, we'll educate them on what really would need to be done
Yeah.
to bring it up to code if they were going to be making it into an apartment building or doing any kind of renovations. And then beyond that, trying to get ahead of that. So before they buy it, we'll go in and we'll renovate it, or we'll go in and we'll tear it down if it's a complete loss. And of course, you know, that'll help try and get rid of asbestos and lead paint before, you know, a family such as
Right,
mine moves in and
right.
with kids and everything like that.
Where in St. Albans do you live?
On Pearl Street. It's parallel to Lake Street.
Right.
So you're on the west side of the tracks, as it were?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, when I lived in St. Albans, there was a real distinction. There was the uphill
really?
side, which is where the people with money lived, and there was the down, and there was a word for it. It was like the blocks or something like that. And so you bought an older home in the older section of the city.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Down
Have you ever
past
seen
Food
these
City.
tiny homes?
Yes.
They're building, there's one that's already built in Barry,
Yes.
and they have one lot, and they're building another one. So the one lot
That-
has two homes. I love those things.
That is actually, I was actually going to get to that next. So the same task force would move to try and set up
They're
a
fabulous.
village of
Yeah,
these
of
tiny
tiny
homes,
Yeah.
specifically to house the homeless.
Right. You
Uh,
could throw
we
in
have-
senior citizens on that.
Anybody that'll
Yeah,
take it.
with-
I mean, fully furnished tiny home would have a shower, a bathroom, a kitchen.
Right.
It'll have heat, electricity. I mean, these tiny homes. My uncle actually has built a couple of them.
Have they?
Yep.
Well, it's so funny. The guy who lives in this tiny home, everybody stops and he's waving. He just sits on the front of it and he waves to everybody because I don't know if you've seen them in Barry.
Yeah,
They're
sure,
fabulous.
sure.
It is fabulous. There's one of them, and I'm waiting for the other one. But
Right.
there's so many
And
designs and so many
Not to
ways.
mention, they're so much cheaper.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially if you build it on wheels. You know, you don't have cost for foundation or anything like that. And it actually, I believe it would change the permitting requirements to try and stick it on a piece of land somewhere. If it's on wheels, it'd be technically a mobile home. So I believe that changes the permitting requirements. So because that's a much more cost-effective and cost-effective and stability increasing way to house our homeless,
Right.
instead of what they had done where they had put them up in motel and hotel rooms, to try and mitigate the effect of the virus on them. We could set up small villages where we could have people that needed housing, and then at the same time, that would make it a lot easier for us to try and teach them permaculture values and try
Those
and get
motels
food for them.
are not conducive to families. There's a motel right down the street from me that they've converted for people that need help. And I've seen people sitting outside, 3 and 4 kids, and I'm like, how?
Right.
A motel room is just that. It's a room with a bed and maybe a dinette sort of thing.
I can
Not
attest
conducive.
to the fact that living out of a motel room is absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
My mother struggled with housing, and so I've slept in a car and I've slept in motel rooms, and
Not good.
it is not a good way to live, especially since you always have this feeling of you have nowhere to rest your head, really.
Right.
No stable
not a home.
stable place. It's not a home.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
So if we can try and eliminate that in our state, house the homeless, house any children in need, and then teach them how to work the land and be able to provide for themselves.
What if they don't want to?
That is, there's definitely people that don't want to be helped.
Right. They don't. They like that
And
lifestyle.
I'm not saying that we're going to force people at all, but I know there will be a significant amount of people that would embrace this type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Struggling with it somewhat in my childhood as well. If someone had offered my mother the chance, we definitely would have been there.
Right.
Yeah.
And life would have went
So-
very
Wow.
differently.
How is your message getting when you're going around talking about running for all these positions? Have you gotten an audience? Are people listening? Do they understand the importance of what you're talking about?
I think they can understand the gravity of the situation.
Right.
And of course, trying to start a war on poverty is very noble. And
I almost use the word restart because
Right.
how many times have we started this? We've talked about this. I've been in state government for 22 years and then was in the legislature for 2 terms. And on every other day, it's like cleaning up Lake Champlain. How many years have we been talking about that?
Exactly.
And that's really important. Not that, but I mean, that's an economic engine and we don't clean that up either. We
Right.
just let it
And
go.
all the permaculture initiatives that I'm seeking to try and start, it's moving away from traditional fertilizers
Right.
and huge fields of corn and stuff like that, and that will significantly reduce runoff into the lake.
Exactly.
Really giving us a good foundation to try and, move forwards with cleanup efforts.
Wayne, I'm curious about your life story. Here, what I see is a young man sleeping in the car with a single mom who is struggling, and now a guy who's got a good job in Williston doing something with aircraft parts. How did you get from A to B?
So it wasn't an all the time thing because I had stability with my father.
Okay.
My dad worked in HVAC for 35 years. Always had the same job. He's had the same house since 1987. And
Yeah.
really, I owe a lot to him for my work ethic and my determination to not live the way that my mother did. So, I got someone telling me and showing me how I should live,
Right.
and then I got the direct opposite, which
That's
was
good.
showing me how I did not want to live.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
the contrast really, it let me see both sides, and both of them made their own luck to a certain extent, and I've tried to do the same for myself. It has not been easy.
Oh, I bet
It
not.
has not been easy, but
not.
Did you end up going to college?
I've had some college. It was for business administration,
Good.
Yeah.
and it was all online, and I paid as I went. I only
Okay.
have a few $1,000s in federal loans,
Wow.
but I did have to stop for financial reasons.
Yeah.
So, couldn't pay
Well,
for
good
school
for
for
you.
anymore.
Good
Had
for you.
to pay the mortgage.
And good for Dad.
Yeah,
Whatever the
he's-
circumstances for when you were with your mom, but good for Dad that he was always in your life. It sounds like.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And he was he knew what was going on, but you know, he didn't want to stop me from seeing my mother, and
Yeah,
you know,
And you went
I
to
respect
school
that.
during all of this? That's the part I find it very, I had an experience, long story short, in a school with a guidance counselor, and I saw some kid just acting out terribly, kicking the teacher, all this stuff, and they finally calmed him down in the calm down room or whatever they call it, and then they put him on the bus. I said, "What's going to happen to this kid?" And they were telling me what a pretty much similar experience, that this child goes home to, sleeps in a car, and I'm like, well, no wonder. I mean, how does he deal with going back to school every day and learning?
Right. I mean, children are our most important asset.
Right.
And, you know, it can be said that I don't have nearly the experience with politics or government or even living as all of my opponents. But the one thing that I do have over them for experience is I am fresh out of Vermont's public school system. So I do know what I learned and what I did not learn. And what I did not learn was the inner workings of local government. I didn't learn how to grow my own food. I didn't learn how we're supposed to coexist and perpetuate systems in our environment that provide us with everything we need. Air, water.
How did you learn all this?
Reading. I've done a lot of reading on my own. You know, looking through the Vermont State Code. Another thing that I would like to try and do is streamline and clarify the state code, because it is.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure there's other states that are worse, but
You could get a college degree just reading that if you understand it.
Exactly. You shouldn't need a law degree to understand the rules that bind you.
Right.
So that's another big push as well. I mean, I'd be having my hands full with trying to start, you know, a permaculture revolution, but you know, we'd also be working on a lot of justice reforms, especially with everything that's going on in the country, in our own state. Thus far, there's a lot of things that we can change. And actually, I know the legislature's on at least the right path when it comes to a lot of this. They just passed 3 bills recently that have to do with justice reform.
Fair policing and body cams and police training,
Yeah, and
oversight.
the governor just put out a recommended listing of other reforms.
Which pretty closely track those laws.
Right.
So yeah, they're doing tangible things that the hope anyway is that it improves, it makes fair cops good, it makes good cops better, and everyone, and the whole
And they
system
want
be better.
that, by the way. The really good law enforcement people want the respect and want to do the right thing.
That's the stated idea behind the bills. Now, some of the cynics would say, well, actually, it's just the people who can't stand the cops getting to have some power and oversight over them. And if so, that's a problem. But you know, hopefully it works the way it's written to.
So can I ask you a question? Here you are, 23. I went to the State House when we were honoring the police, and we were on one side of the lawn, and the other side of the lawn were a lot of people your age, angry, just spouting stuff. They're just right from their toes, the anger. Their whole body was angry. And you're not. You just want to do something. And I was looking at them. I think I could have. I've said this to Guy. I could have been every one of their grandmother, and I don't think they knew that they were making us mad, and so they're not going to get anywhere. I hope not. Anyway, I mean, just from that behavior, you are an asset to this state because you're willing to sit and talk to us and show us what's a better way of living.
Right.
And you have more power over me, and if I may include Guy, but over the people than those children acting like they scared me. I was scared, and once I'm scared, I'm not really crazy about you anymore, and I may not listen, and that's just the wrong way to behave.
Another thing, Wayne, is you don't seem to have your hand out either.
No,
your hand seems to be working.
Working.
My campaign is. I'm really, everything is stacked against me. I'm young, I've never held an office before. Not many people know me, and I have a $0 budget for my campaign. Really, and I'm not, another piece that I almost forgot to mention is that I'm not accepting any donations of money.
Huh.
So, you know, another thing, one of the main reasons I first thought of trying to do something like this was just all of the corruption and all of the money that plays into modern day politics. You know, $1 equaling 1 vote. Statistics prove that the most successful campaigns are the ones that spend the most money. And I really I wanted to do something that was 180 degrees of that.
Right.
And that's really where I started.
Have you gotten any media coverage, people writing stories about your story?
I haven't seen that. And then another thing that I've almost stacked against myself is trying to not use social media, which is probably going to be, you know, very hard against my campaign. But Facebook is very toxic. Instagram,
Yes.
the likes of that. It is not good to have so many different echo chambers just reinforcing misinformation constantly. And so, I mean, I have a Facebook page for my campaign, but I rarely do anything with it, and I never check my own personal Facebook. And so I'm trying to make a stand against that as well. Had I not been running, I would have actually deleted my account.
Yep.
But, you know, had to at least hold on to it
Are
a
you
little
getting
bit.
support from, because you're running as an independent, so are you getting any support at all from neighbors, friends, that are out helping you?
Friends and family,
Yeah.
mostly. But I mean, most of the people I talk to, you know, I'm not out here saying,
Yeah.
you know, vote for me. I'm just saying, here's what I'm going to do.
Right.
Look at what the other people are going to do and think for yourself.
I hope if you don't win, I hope you take this energy and go talk to schools, go talk to where kids are, and you know, where maybe we can start a movement,
Right.
because it makes sense to me.
Well, we learned this year, food insecurity.
Yeah.
Those shelves don't just stock themselves at the supermarket. If they're
Exactly.
part of a food chain, and if you rely on that, it could be tough. Have you thought about spreading the word John Lee Appleseed style in St. Albans? You know, just with neighbors and the Energy
Right.
Conservation, Energy
Right.
Commission and all that?
Yeah, I've talked to a few of my neighbors. My property is kind of weird in that it's long, and I have maybe 8 neighbors that
Oh.
their property touches mine. So it was strange. Until the shutdown, I really hadn't met most of them. But since the shutdown, more people were in their backyards.
Is that,
so
oh, there you go. They're
I've
home.
met all of them now,
Yeah.
and at least talked to them, and they know who I am and at least what I'm trying to do. And
So is the House of Representatives, any of those positions open? I mean, or are they both, they have 2, you think, or 1?
I'm not. I believe there's two
Two.
state
Two.
reps for St. Albans,
Yeah.
and then I believe 2 senators.
Are they, and
Casey
are-
Toof and Mike McCarthy are the 2 in there right now.
Who is that?
Democrat, Casey Toof, a Republican,
Toof,
and Mike
right.
McCarthy, a Democrat.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh, so
and then I know at
they're
least-
running again.
They are, and there's
Yeah.
Yep, they're running again, and then, boy, I believe there has to be like 5 other people running.
I think so.
There's, I believe, 3 independents that are going after it.
More
including
independents
myself.
this year than ever before, at least who we've asked to come on the show, or they've asked to come on the show. A lot of independents we've interviewed.
Right?
Yeah, which is maybe saying something about.
Yeah, and that's another thing that is stacked against my campaign. All of them is being independent. I believe Vermont hasn't had an independent governor since 1798.
Huh,
I believe it was
interesting.
Governor
that-
Chittenden, actually.
Oh, okay.
Possibly.
Yeah. What happens, I think, in independent, it's hard for, if you say Democrat or Republican, they have an immediate idea
Right.
of where your
Immediately
mindset is.
Left or right,
Right.
red or blue. And
Yeah.
You know, the polarizing nature of our politics today is very disastrous. We can't get anything done.
Yeah.
Especially since, you know, so many different people, it's not really love for their own party, it's a hate for the other. And
Right.
that's, you know, it's just
Yeah.
it's not conducive
Yeah.
to good government. It's not conducive to, you know, providing for the needs of people struggling.
Guy goes up to the State House a lot. Over the years, we have lost the ability to negotiate, to find that balance. It's either my way or the highway. And we used to say all the time, the best bill is the third bill, your bill, my bill, and the one we've managed to agree on. They don't do that anymore.
No.
It's gone.
So speaking of easy, non-divisive issues, where do you stand in the abortion question?
Oh,
So that definitely, I think, at least kind of ties into people that are against mask mandates, against seatbelt rules and stuff like this. It's your body. The government should not tell you what you can and cannot do with it. But at the same time, you know, you have to have some kind of regulation. You know, so many people were dying flying through their windshields,
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
needed seatbelts. And so many people were getting infected because we weren't wearing masks. There needs to be safety as well. I'm not going to sit here and say that, you know, I want people to go out and get all kinds of abortions. I don't really think that's right. But at the same time, you know, there's people that need it or really they need it for medical reasons or otherwise, and we shouldn't do something to stop that from happening. What I'm saying is hands off, but then obviously we need to make sure that the medical practices
Right.
doing so
Yeah.
are safe.
because
Okay.
before Roe versus Wade, I had two friends of mine who went seriously to the back alley.
Okay.
Right.
One came out, thank God, perfect. She could have children. It just worked for her. The other one was just ripped to shreds, couldn't have any children anymore. So, and I'm not a big fan of abortion, but once Roe versus Wade came out, I said at least they'll be able to go to a hospital
Somewhere
and
safe.
and somewhere safe, exactly. Because before that, it was back alley stuff, and it wasn't good.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, the critics would say, tough luck for the life inside the mom.
No, you know where I'm on abortion.
Right.
I'm not in favor of it
Right.
after 3 months, but at least now they can go for somewhere safe, which is better
Somewhere
than a
safe.
back alley.
Right.
So you mentioned you're okay with hunting. Second Amendment is another hot issue in the State House. So where do you stand on
Gun reform.
on gun rights?
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, a lot of people, when it comes to this issue, it's banning or it's deregulation and all these types of things. But if we get really at the heart of the situation, we can try and bring both sides together. You know, if we reinvest in mental health institutions, and we work to educate children on gun and safety rules, because there are going to be a lot of people hunting. My father is a lifetime hunter. And we don't want to stop that because, you know, honestly, hunting can be very good for deer populations.
Oh, sure.
And other populations of
Yeah,
animals,
right.
for sure.
Right.
So really, my campaign, my administration, and everything like that really wouldn't do too much here that is directly tied to firearms. But it would be more or less preventing any gun laws, or not preventing gun laws, I'll take that back. Not preventing any deaths from firearms through education and reinvesting in public health and to trying to make everyone more responsible when it comes to
I see.
having guns. I don't want to take anybody's guns away,
Yep.
but I'm not saying that everybody should have a gun. I'm just saying everyone should know how to operate something safely
Right.
that could
Have
end a
some
life
respect
instantly.
for the gun.
Right.
Yeah, are we still the safest state or the second safest state? I heard that the other day.
I think in terms
We
of
may- Gun
of,
safety.
of murders,
Yeah.
of people shooting other people,
Yeah,
we are definitely like the safest or one of the safest. I think there are some numbers about suicide that maybe aren't
Right.
quite as strong.
Right.
Yeah,
And that-
especially in teenagers.
And
that's
that
the-
would be where the mental health part of it would
Yeah,
come in,
right,
is
Yeah.
suicide by a firearm, I believe, is the most prevalent in the country when it comes
Yeah,
to
we're the
firearm
highest
death.
suicide rate of children, of teenagers. But I don't know if it's specific by gun. I would assume that's the way most of them
Right.
have chosen to end their life, sadly.
But yeah, so if we can reinvest in mental health, not only suicide by gun, but other types of suicide, depression, anxiety, and things like that, we can try and, reduce those rates instead of, trying to battle the symptom and go right for the
Yeah, right,
cause.
for the cause,
Right.
exactly. I don't think we do that well here. We Band-Aid the symptoms and sort of skip over the cause. I know this is probably, given what your focus is, but the big issue for a lot of people is the $4.5 billion in liability for the state and teachers' pensions. And that's got to be paid off somehow. And I don't know if you've paid attention to that, but that's a huge issue.
If he hasn't, he's in good company.
Well, exactly.
Because neither
Oh,
is the
really?
legislature.
Oh, yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, again, I had said earlier that I wanted to shake down all the state agencies and try and reduce waste where we can, consolidate where we can, try and bring a lot of our agencies together, or if not closer to the capital, closer to the places where they're most needed,
Right.
to reduce traveling costs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, to try and bring more money in, I believe they're currently working on a bill, but we'll see how that goes when it gets to the governor's desk. But fully legalize marijuana,
I think
regulate
that
and tax
Didn't
it.
it pass today?
It passed the legislature, and the
House.
governor has not decided.
Whether
He's
he's signing.
perhaps leaning towards
Signing it?
signing it.
Right.
Yeah.
So should that not go through, that's what we'll do. But that would definitely help increase revenue for the state to help try and offset some of that. But there is.
Would you have a little plot?
I mean, it's definitely possible to try and bring in some more money somehow.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there was something, I'm not sure if it was in this bill or the previous bill in regards to marijuana, but there was something in there where they tried to define marijuana as something that was not a plant. Or
To do
something-
what? To get away with what law?
to try and make it so that anybody growing it had to grow it indoors, or and basically indoors.
But that, I mean, the electricity and the heat.
Electricity, heat, but then at the same time, initial costs to get it going.
Right.
So that would mean that large corporations could come into our state
Right.
and start these, and our local farmers wouldn't be able to do it right off the bat.
Yeah.
And
Well, I don't
I think
agree with
it's
that.
I think it's just it's unnerving that they're trying to say that a plant that grows from the ground isn't a plant and cannot be grown outside. That just seems.
Is that seriously what they're, I haven't been paying attention.
I believe that was in
They're
the
trying to
bill
skirt
before
something,
that just decriminalized it, but
Oh, good, let's be the pot capital of the world, that's just wonderful.
Well, I do know that the Rural Vermont and the Northern Organic Farmers Association are both opposing this bill because what they say is that, and so are the Justice for All people, because they say basically these out-of-state, white-owned agribusinesses
that's
are going to come in, do everything,
Right.
run everything, and the small minorities and the small rural farms are going to be just left out.
Yeah,
right.
But if you
I
have
mean,
to
it
grow
needs
it
to be
inside,
local
the
first.
issue, when I was studying this, when they first started talking about it, the cost of heat and electricity just goes
Oh, yeah.
through the roof. I mean, it's 24/7, right?
Sure.
Right.
You have to
gotta-
grow them in heat and it has to be sunlight or whatever.
It's a lot more to growing them indoors. Of course,
Right.
you know.
And then you have to have people knocking on the door to check if you've got more than they said you could grow, and if you're growing them. I mean, they got the marijuana police knocking on our door.
Yeah, I think it's a plant. It should be treated as such.
For
It's a
sure.
crop. It really, we need to focus on allowing our farmers
Right.
in Vermont
Right.
to have the first crack at it,
Right.
to try and keep some of these bigger corporations away from, coming into our state and then taking that money and moving it out of the state. Because the market's there. It'll definitely increase revenue. It's another tax source. I mean, it makes sense to just go ahead and pull the Band-Aid off and, start getting the money back into things that we need to pay, like the pension
Right.
fund.
Right.
Yeah.
Good for you. Wayne, we have 2.34 minutes. Could you spend some time talking about why people should vote for you? And we could do that all-encompassing statement for whatever position.
Right.
And there's your camera. Go for it.
All right. I'm Wayne Billado III, and I'm running for governor, lieutenant governor, state senate, Franklin County, St. Albans, representative 3-1, and justice of the peace. I'm a father, a son, a brother, a neighbor, and most importantly, from when I was born, a Vermonter. My campaign is definitely has the odds stacked against it. I have no political affiliation. I have a $0 budget for my campaign, and I do not accept donations of money. To top it all off, I'm only 23 years old, and I've never held an office before. My initiatives in any of the positions that I get will be to start getting our focus on permaculture and building a food forest network in the state. To do that, we would need to educate our school children, educate the homeless and house the homeless, and then provide grants and other funding for people starting up small farms in their own backyard. There's so many more things that I want to do and say, but I have all kinds of different justice reforms that I would pursue as well. And yeah, that if you're looking for a change of pace and a friendly face, somebody that's not affiliated with any of the shenanigans of the two-party system in our state and our country, then I'm the guy.
For you, Wayne. Good. I'm sure, Guy, and I wish you the very best.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Got a real challenge ahead of you, but just
For sure.
keep up the good work. Thank you all for tuning in. Guy, thank you for joining us.
fun.
We'll see you next week, and in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.